We are both blessed and cursed today. On the one hand, when I was growing up trying to learn how to hunt, there wasn't information. I was going out there falling on my face, making a fool of myself. But I was also learning. The good side is today, there is all sorts of information, but a heck of a lot of it is trying to con you into spending money. So much of this stuff does not have to cost money. What we're going to talk about today is exactly that, how we can get the most out of these things without breaking the bank. We talk a ton about creating high odds, low impact setups. To be most effective, you have to match your improvements to the habitat. Western habitat, heck of a lot different than Midwestern habitat. He's not putting all that energy into building up his antlers until his body's taken care of. The overwhelming majority of the tips that I come up with are issues I'm running into while I'm out here working. More and more, hunting is turning into a rich man's sport, which frankly stinks. In some ways it doesn't have to be though. Sure, police prices are unbelievably ridiculous. It's not like when I was a kid where you could go around knocking on doors and actually get permission just like that from as many different people as you could possibly want. When I was a kid, I had more hunting ground than I could ever possibly dream of. As I get older and older and the years pass, it's getting to be less and less. Now I'm lucky in that I do a bunch of consulting for private landowners where I go out and set them up. And part of my contract allows me to hunt their ground then as well. But to this day, I still do hunt public ground. And that is one way that we can cut costs. Yeah, public ground is a challenge. It truly is. But it is nowhere near as horrifically bad as so many people try to make it out to be. If you are willing to work a little bit harder, think a little smarter than the other hunters, you can often find those pockets. You can typically find those pockets that no one else goes. That's where you're going to find Mr. Big darn near every time. All that costs is the gas for us to get out there. And then even on private ground, there are so many things that we can do that don't have to cost a cent. We don't have to have all the highfalutin equipment. Is it nice? Oh man is it ever. But as I said, I personally don't own that much top-end equipment at all. I'm blessed that, I pro staff for some of the most awesome companies out there, so I get to use top-end junk. But you don't have to spend money on all this stuff. There's a lot of things we can do out there that cost us virtually nothing. If we're on private ground, we can go ahead for just the cost of a shovel and a 20-gallon water trough. We can go ahead and make ourselves a water source to help draw deer, just simply by burying that water trough down to the lip, packing the dirt around it good, throwing a couple inches of dirt in the bottom, putting a big stick in there so that the rodents can crawl out. Mock scrapes. The ones that I create for hunting, I typically do use a Magnum scrape dripper and either active scrape or golden scrape in it, but you don't absolutely have to. Just simply bending that branch down to nose level, pawing on the dirt. Man, when you're talking peak scrape phase, those bucks, they almost can't help themselves. They can be nice little difference makers for not only helping a little bit to draw that buck to the spot we need for a shot, but then stop him there. Stop him there, position him, looking away, all of his attention's away from you, so you got all day to get off the shot. Another thing, that trail that you're covering, you need to cover that trail and you need to be in that spot to do it. But, 50 yards, 100 yards that way or that way, a trail breaks off before it reaches you. Go in there, block it with some brush. You're hunting that creek crossing. Get in there, make that creek crossing nice and easy to cross, and then block the other ones. You're hunting that fence line, assuming it's your fence or you have permission to do so. Take some wire, put it around the barbed wire, cinch it. Make it so that The fence goes like this. Now, they've got a nice easy place to jump, nice easy place to crawl underneath. There's all sorts of things. You don't have cover on your tree stand. Cut some branches, affix them to the tree, wire them to the tree, put them in the outside grids of your platform. There's all sorts of things that we can do out in the deer woods that don't have to cost us a cent. Now, use your mind, be creative. You can keep costs down to virtually nothing. Grown Big TV is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. Redneck Blinds, the best hunting blinds on the planet. Furminator, the best food plot implement on earth. Hunter Safety System, saving lives is what we do. And by Antler King, bigger bucks, healthier deer.
Antler King, makers of the world's best food plot products, providing the highest protein and the most tonnage. But most importantly, deer love Antler King food plots. Antler King, bigger bucks, healthier deer.
This segment of Grown Big TV is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. As you can see, there's all sorts of ways that we don't have to spend money to actually help our habitat and hunting. And that's what we're going to talk about again next segment. The next segment coming up, we're going to talk about hinge cutting. As long as we have a handsaw, it doesn't have to cost us a cent. And we can transform habitat just like that. One of the best ways to manipulate the deer woods is frankly with a chainsaw. Now, it's quick, instantaneous. When you do it right, you can produce significant results in nothing more than a day's worth of work. What we're going to talk about today specifically is hinge cutting. And even micromanaging it down a little bit more, we're going to talk about hinge cut bedding areas. As you'll find, as the show unravels, there's all sorts of different ways that you can use hinge cuts. You can go ahead and create screens, you can create blockades, you can create bedding areas, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So how do you go about creating a hinge cut bedding area? The first thing you need to understand is how you hinge a tree. Hinging a tree, you're really doing nothing more than cutting just far enough through that tree so that tree falls down, but still maintains that connection to the root system. If it can maintain that connection to the root system, that tree can live. Before you hit the woods though, well frankly what we're going to do to cover ourselves is we're going to suggest that you hire professional loggers to do this. Now, if you do decide to do this yourself though, a few rules to keep in mind. First, there's no excuse to be out there with a chainsaw unless you're wearing a helmet and chaps. None whatsoever. Next, always place safety first. We're talking about deer here, people. It's not worth risking a life. Now, if that tree's got dead branches on it, you know what? There's a reason that loggers call them widowmakers. You leave it the heck alone. On hinge cutting, you never fight tree lean. You have to take the tree the way it's leaning. And you know what? If you're uncomfortable, you walk away from that tree. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to cut that tree a percentage of the way through to get that tree to fall. But maintain that connection to the root system. If it maintains that connection to the root system, a percentage of the trees are going to live. And you just created cover just like that. So what I do is I go into areas that I believe, okay, I want deer to bed here. So I will hinge cut anywhere from a quarter to an acre area. I'm going to try to create a false ceiling. By that, what I mean is I want to drop the biggest trees first and then lay the littler trees over top of it so now those deer can skirt around inside there with no problem whatsoever. It's very, very effective. Some species don't hinge as well as others. They'll go ahead and snap and go to the ground. That's okay, because you've went ahead and you've opened the area up to sunlight. By opening it up to sunlight, you get all these new sprouts coming up, weeds, grasses, and saplings. Just like that, you increase the level of browse in your woods. Okay, and also, as I said, all your trees for as much as I want to create that false ceiling, if I don't, if a bunch of them go down to the ground, that's okay, because I can, if it gets too thick, I can always cut trails through there. What we're really trying to do is we are trying to create an area that has a surplus of browse and a surplus of cover. You do that as long as it's not in a ridiculous area, and you're going to get your does to bed there. So what are some of the traits that does like when it comes to bedding area? In swamp countries, the edges of swamps are good locations. Okay. In hill country, the tops are very good. The bottoms are very good. Points work out well as also, but I tend to save those for bucks. Now, I don't create very many buck beds. What I do is I just leave the obvious buck bedding locations alone, because the bucks already want to bed there. If I'm going to do anything, I'll go in and I'll hinge 1 or 2 trees and create a little igloo that they can climb, that they can go ahead and crawl underneath. They've got an entrance, they've got an exit, they've got a little bit extra cover. But buck beds, in my opinion, frankly, are grotesquely overrated. I have exceptionally good luck getting bucks to bed in areas that they already want to bed. So what good is it doing creating a buck bed? They want to bed there already. Okay. In areas that they don't naturally want to bed, it doesn't matter how good a cover I create, they don't bed there at a high percentage. So now that we understand hinge cutting, we don't ever misunderstand this. I'm not ever suggesting you go out and hinge cut your 40 acres. That would be pants on head stupid. What you want to do instead is you want to use it as a scalpel. You use logging as your machete, you use hinge cutting as your scalpel. And we're going to talk about specific ways we can pull that off next. Of all the tools in our toolbox, all the various things we can do as habitat managers, one of the toughest to pull off is blockading. Frankly, it's really, really difficult to stop deer from going places where they want to go. You know, it's tough. One way to do it is high fence. But for those of us who don't like messing with fence a lot, we talk a lot about hinge cutting. Okay. Edge feathering around food sources oftentimes works very effective, because you have such lush new growth come in that it fills stuff up. So we go ahead and continue to throw chunks, tops of brush in the trails that they end up sneaking through after we edge feather. You know, we can do pretty darn well with it. Another area where it works very well is when you're going through the timber following drainages. And that's what we just did today. Now, those drains themselves, the drains that, you know what, they're a pain for deer to cross, but it's far from impossible and they're crossing them. Those types of drains actually work out fairly well for hinge cutting, creating hinge cut blockades, because it's already a pain for the deer to go through. And that's what I just got done doing this on a little ditch. The ditch is nowhere near nasty enough to stop deer from crossing. Now, if I go ahead and just go through the woods and do a swath of hinge cutting, alternating height anywhere from knee to about mid stomach level, you know, making it so it's tough to crawl under, hard to jump over. You know what? It's real tough in most woods to pull that off. Follow a drain and all of a sudden you can do it. You go ahead and do the hinge cutting, you plug the trails, you drop them along that drain, which is already a pain to cross. Now you've just made it that much harder. It's much more effective than just blindly going through the woods. Of course, when you're talking property edge access and you're bringing big equipment in to create roads anyway, you know, they stack that stuff up. That is extremely, extremely effective. The other way to get deer pretty effectively to stop going through areas is to create a tornado zone. Those tornado zones, you just go ahead and you take that entire area and you hinge cut everything from knee to mid-stomach level, and you know what? You create that tornado zone. Can they sneak through it? Sure they can. Can they sneak through across that drainage blockade you created? Sure they can. Can they sneak through other areas on your edge feathering outside of that one spot where you made it all nice and easy for them to enter and exit? Sure they can. But you make your areas so much easier. And the areas you don't want them to go through, so much more of a pain. And you know what? They're that much more effective. Will it stop every single deer? No. But if it stops that buck you're trying to kill, and he comes through because of this, and you're able to shoot him while you're on stand, you know what? It's well worth it. Grown Big TV is brought to you by Chestnut Hill Outdoors, RECONYX, see what you've been missing, and by Wildlife Research Center, the gold standard. We are truly lucky to again be with Ian Wallace of Chestnut Hill Outdoors. Ian Wallace and his family are 100% responsible for the Dunkston chestnut. Along with, your family runs a very robust nursery. This young man has literally grown up in the family orchard and has forgotten more about mass trees, soft and hard, than I'll ever pretend to know. So, we're going to use this as a resource. Ian, what are the best planting techniques? If you want, there's really not much more frustrating than running down to the store, picking up some trees, going out, visions of sugar plums dancing through your head because, man, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to put these in, and within, it says here on the tag, within 2 years, I'm going to have all the, well, geez, 3/4 of them die, and 5 years later, they still haven't produced, the few survivors still haven't produced anything. First off, what type of conditions are we looking for when it comes to planting these trees to stack the odds for our success?
That's a great question. So the first thing that we advise our consumer is to go look at your local climate. Where are you located, and what are the temperatures in your area? The best way to check this out is to go to the USDA plant zone. You can find that online if you Google USDA plant zone.
Yeah, you won't have any problems coming up with a plethora of options on that.
And what we as a nursery take pride in is we only supply areas with trees that are going to do well in your area.
And if you don't mind, let's pause there just for a second. That's something I've seen over and over and over on clients' grounds when I show up. I'll tell you what, there's a reason they have what zones any type of tree thrives in.
Correct.
Match those zones. When you start pushing them, I can't even imagine how frustrating it is to get 5-6 years into this and it's just starting to produce real good, and none of them survived winter.
Exactly.
Matching those zones is critical.
It's critical.
Okay. And then once we got that zone down, what are we looking for soil types? And I know this is a loaded question because every tree is different.
Yep. It's a very loaded question, but what we recommend is go check out the soil on your property. A really easy thing for you to do is to take a soil sample and go to your local ag extension office. You can have them test your soil and they'll tell you exactly what's in it.
And one question I get over and over and over to wrap up on is, do I want bare roots or do I want potted trees? The potted trees have the advantage of, I've got some years on them, whereas the bare roots are generally younger. Everybody goes for the potted. Everybody, just simply because, man, I want to get there. Just briefly, what's the advantages and disadvantages of potted versus bare root?
That's yet another topic that I think could go either way.
Bare root trade-offs and everything in life.
It's just as good as a potted plant.
And actually, in a way, it's the huge advantage of a bare root is 20 years, you don't have that root ball. Mm-hmm. So 20 years from now, those roots are like this, and that tree ain't going nowhere.
Exactly.
Whereas that root ball is a little bit dicier in that situation.
And so the reason that we ship bare root during the spring is because it's coming out of dormancy and the tree is asleep. So you can take it out of its pot and its soil, and you can transport it
Sure.
and safely get it to its location.
And
you
it's
can
a lot
ship.
less stressful
It's
than
less shipping costs. It's less. It's less risky.
me being a Wisconsin boy. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense for me to call you up and say, "Hey, could you ship me up 4 Dunstan chestnuts that are potted?" Because the shipping costs are going to kill me. But I can go
Astronomical.
ahead and call you up any time of year and ask you, "Could you send me up 4 bare roots?"
Correct.
And that is a reasonable purchase.
And that's the easiest way to receive our trees, the quickest and most efficient.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, my friend.
Thanks, Steve.